Is this the first time in history that you're in total agreement with David Cameron that the Greens should take part in these debates?
I think it probably is the first time, yes, and very pleased to hear him say it. Now, I'm quite aware that he has his own political reasons for saying so, but nonetheless he does helpfully point to the fact, I think, that however you cut the cake, the Greens should be included. If you use the measurement of whether or not we're already in Parliament, well, we've had an MP for longer than UKIP. If you use the measurement of how we've been doing in recent polls, we're ahead of the Liberal Democrats. The European elections put us well ahead of the Lib Dems. We gained an MEP, they went down to just one. So whichever way you look at it, I think the Greens should be included, and I think crucially the public want us to be included as well.
OK, well, you've got the support of the Liberal Democrats as well. I just want to play you while you sort out your earpiece there, Caroline. Sort out that out and just play you a little bit of what the former Lib Dem leader, Paddy Ashdown, said to me about what he agrees with you and what the Greens should do if you continue to be excluded. Let's just have a listen to Paddy Ashdown.
It's a decision that ought to be decided by an independent body, subject to law. That's the principle we're attached to. Not about the Greens coming in, it's about making sure politicians don't make this decision. And you guys, Sky, you almost invented these things, together with the BBC, have, subject to law, come up with a certain set of propositions. It's not our job to intervene. By the way, they're not very good for us. I mean, we have things that we don't like about them, but we'll accept them in the interest of debate. If it's the case that the Greens want in there, it's perfectly clear what they should do. Not hide behind the Prime Minister, but go to court, and there's legislation, they can challenge it. Let them do that.
Go to court. Well, Caroline, what do you think of that? If you aren't allowed in, take legal action.
Well, we are exploring and have been exploring precisely that. So the idea that we're somehow cowering behind David Cameron is one that I would refute. Of course we're taking legal advice and will continue to do so. But I also hope that the Ofcom and the broadcasters will look at what the public are saying. We've got around 300,000 members of the public now signed up to a petition saying that they think the Greens should be included, not because they necessarily support our policies, but because they think there is an issue here of fairness and justice. And frankly, they want to hear, I think, a voice that is somewhat different from the four other parties, the four other men in their grey suits, who will be talking about things like bringing rail back into public ownership, scrapping Trident, putting the environment at the heart of our agenda, all policies that you're not getting from any of the other parties. I think there's a public duty, a public broadcaster's duty, if you like, to let the public know that there is another party on offer at the next election who can put forward those policies which are very popular.
OK, well, it's me bring in Damian McBride and Stewart Purvis. I mean, Damian, do you feel that the Prime Minister, this is tactical, he's using the Greens as a smokescreen, so as he just doesn't want to do these debates because he's Prime Minister and he doesn't want to give, particularly Ed Miliband, the airtime?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly tactical, and also this is the first stage in it, because if the Greens do succeed in getting into the debates, then suddenly all hell breaks loose because the SNP want to take part and plead Cymru and the Ulster Nationalists. So you end up in a position where, one way or another, he either turns this into sort of chaos that can never happen, or just kills it at the first hurdle.
Well, Stewart, while you were at ITN, I was there as well. I know you went through many general elections trying to get debates off the ground. They finally happened last time round. Do you I mean, in your heart of hearts, do you think that might be the only time that we've seen them, that they won't happen this time?
It is possible. Remember that after the famous Kennedy-Nixon debates in the States, it was 16 years before there was another one. So we shouldn't take these things for granted, and there's no assumption, there should be no assumption that they will. I think that, this focus on the Green issue is quite right. But I think we're missing a point here. As I understand it, the Conservative Party position is not just about the Greens being in one debate. It's about the fact that they would prefer just two debates, one with Ed Miliband and one with a number of other people, should say, including the Greens. Now, of course, the people who get squeezed by that are the Liberal Democrats, because at the moment they've got a debate of the three of them. So if there's a two debate and there's a 4, 5, even 6 debate, the Liberal Democrats are going to scream about that. Now, is that again what you're saying, Dame? Is that actually that Conservatives know that for every time you do one deal, another deal gets unpicked, and therefore there's almost a kind of perpetual crisis?
Do you think that would damage him, though, if we do get to the general election, Damian McBride, and, the FRIT phrase, the phrase used by Margaret Thatcher and Dennis Healey way back in 1983, would that damage someone in a general election or in the heat of everything else that's being discussed? would the electorate really care whether there were debates or not?
Well, I think it's one of these issues that will keep coming up with David Cameron, and he's already shown his irritation about that in Washington. He was very irritated that when he's got his chance to strut his stuff on the world stage, he's been asked about these debates. But don't forget, he's also playing one other clever tactical game here. If the debates do happen somehow, and he goes into them, then people will say David Cameron didn't want these debates. He was the last person that wanted to be standing on this podium. If he then does well, which he should, he's an experienced debater, suddenly he's gone in with low expectations, and he can come out of them saying, well, I don't know what I was worried about, I quite enjoyed that. And so everything is about reducing expectations and then exceeding them.
Well, why don't the broadcaster Stewart Purvis just call the bluff and say, OK, we'll bring the Greens in. You know, they can make up those rules, can't they? It's up to them.
There are two bluffers. They could either let the Greens in or not let the Greens in. Let's be absolutely clear. There's been a lot of muddle here about what the rules are. The rules are actually, it's down to the broadcasters. They make the call, and they have to be able to justify the call afterwards to the regulators like Ofcom and the BBC Trust. So in a sense, all the idea somehow made the regulators, like, Caroline just referred to, Ofcom should do this and Ofcom that. I mean, I was in the equivalent position at Ofcom last time. I've been pretty honest, I didn't do much while it was going on. My judgment was about what happened after we'd seen the transmission. Did that meet the rules? So the broadcasters...
And these are rules of balance and fairness.
Exactly. And let's be absolutely clear, there's also quite separately a consultation going on about the number of party election broadcasts that people should have. And people are kind of conflating the two. They are separate. Getting party election broadcasts at a certain number doesn't give you a ticket to the debates.
Well, there is one thing that flows from that, is the fact that Ofcom... I mean, what do you think about this, given what Caroline Lucas has said about the Greens' credentials and support, that Ofcom declared that UKIP is a main party, and that obviously has an influence on the number of party election broadcasts they get, but the Greens are not.
No, well, there's a consultation going on that, and Caroline and the Green Party have an opportunity now to involve themselves in that consultation, put forward their case to Ofcom about why they should. But again, that only covers the minimum number of party election broadcasts you get. But some sort of special status is being put on this major party status. I actually think it should be kept separate, and people should say, what kind of television programme do the broadcasters want to make? Who are the right people to invite to the programme, depending on what the programme's about?
Let me ask Damian about last time round, where, we just had the straight 3-3-3 three times round. What was Gordon Brown's calculation about why he would do it? It was because, basically, he was behind in the polls, and he thought, I've got nothing to lose, wasn't it?
He was well behind, and also thought that this might be the chance to put some pressure on David Cameron. What neither of them were expecting was that you would have this surge of Clegg mania, that Nick Clegg would do so well, and that came to be the dominant feature out of the first debate. Then it raised expectations for the second, and then the third, if you remember, was totally overshadowed by the Mrs Duffy incident, which happened just the day before.
But I mean, that scarred the Conservatives in particular, didn't it? And probably David Cameron, the thought that it might have won an outright majority had they not had that Clegg effect.
Yes, and I think the problem with David Cameron was, again, he went into those debates as the favourite. Nobody expected Gordon Brown to do well. Nobody knew what to expect from Nick Clegg. And again, that's why I say it's very good for David Cameron that if these debates do happen, he will go into them almost as a bit of an underdog, because people will be saying he didn't want to do these.
OK, let's talk to Caroline Lucas about some of those suggestions that observations Stewart Purvis was making, and in particular about Ofcom. You touched on it, Caroline Lucas. I mean, you can pursue this further with Ofcom, the fact that they decided that the Greens were not, quote-unquote, a main party.
Well, we will be pursuing it further with Ofcom, as we will directly with the broadcasters. That's what we're doing. But I do think that the problem with the approach that they're taking is that they're looking at the past rather than what's happening right now. Right now, there is a political revolution happening. Our membership has doubled in the last 2 months alone. We now have more members than UKIP or the Liberal Democrats. More than 8,000 people joined us in the last week alone. So, there is a real appetite out there for people to know what the Green Party stands for. And it seems to me a fairly basic premise that if that's the case, then that should be reflected in these debates. And of course, these debates are very different from your ordinary party election broadcasts, because last time around, I think it's been estimated around 20 million people watched at least part of these big debates. So they do have a massive impact on the outcome of the election, or at least they can do. They have an awful lot of influence. And that means that given our size, given that we're growing, given the popularity, the broadcasters should be reflecting that.
OK, I mean, so many issues here, so many legal issues, so many broadcasting issues. But Damian McBride, the other thing we're leaving out of this, of course, is the exposure for UKIP and Nigel Farage. Obviously, the Conservatives don't want to boost that vote anymore. Are they using the Greens as a counter, hoping that, if they get exposure, they'll nibble a bit out of the Labour vote?
Yeah, undoubtedly, and that's the plan. I think that's a dangerous thing to wish for, though, because what you could end up with in that situation, which is why ultimately David Cameron doesn't want to do this, is everyone ganging up on him. Where you have, if you imagine if you do have the Greens and Labour on one side, Liberals and UKIP on the other, but all of them would find something to attack in David Cameron. And I think that's the great danger for him, and might sort of provoke that sort of irritation that sometimes comes out too easily from David Cameron.
Do you feel, Stewart, it did suck the life out of the campaign? This is another of the things we're hearing from Number 10. It sucked the life out of the campaign in 2010. Everyone just focused on those debates.
Well, it is a matter of record that the coverage, whether it be in the newspapers or television and radio, was obsessed with coverage before the debates of what's going to happen in debates and then what happened in the debate. And the timing meant that there wasn't much gap, if you like, for any other issues to get between. So I can totally understand why the Conservative Party argument, they want to create gaps, if you like, between the debates to create more space for something else.
And if he keeps on refusing, do you think in the parlance the broadcasters would dare empty chair him, have 4 podiums and an empty podium for David Cameron?
I don't think we should rule out the broadcasters might split apart at some point. And actually, I could easily see one broadcaster being prepared to do an empty chair. I'm not sure which one yet, but we'll wait and see.
OK, well.